I'm actually going to mention this book in the lesson in just a minute anyway, but I'll let you see it. And it's been a big help for me. Got to get to the right page here. But you can see the cover on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is Denny Petrillo's rather. I'm going to mention, I think I'm going to mention that to begin with. So exactly what this is and where you can find more information. Okay, I will. Hi, everybody out there. Now, I'm Steve, and I'm the teacher this morning for our Saturday morning, second Saturday class here at Northside. And we've been studying the Minor Prophets, and today we're going to be studying Nahum, is the way Norm likes to pronounce it. Most of the southern folks are going to say Nahum, and but if you were Jewish, you'd say Nahum. So you can clear your throat any time that you want to do that, because that's actually the way it would have been pronounced at the time that he was around. Tommy had asked about this book right here. It's called The Minor Prophets, and I know that it's probably too far away for you to be able to read it, but I wanted to give you some information as to where you might find more information about the Minor Prophets. I've got, it's at the very end of our outline here. I've got some sources that you can look up. Now the sources, these are some of the sources I used in coming up with the lesson. And World Video Bible School. World Video Bible School offers courses to people that are interested in becoming preachers. But you can also sign up for a course just to learn about whatever the subject is. And Denny Petrillo did this particular study originally back in 1961. It's really not been revised very much, but then again, you don't need to revise history, do you? History is history. But also, on gospel broadcasting, Eddie Parrish also has videos that are studying the Minor Prophets. And you can go specifically to whichever prophet you want. Whenever you're doing these studies, you can order a study book and his notes, and they've actually got a bunch of these online now. So this is just a source that you can go to find out more information. Also, I looked up a bunch of secular YouTube videos on Nineveh, because that's what we're talking about today. But before we go any further, let's have an opening prayer. And Tommy, would you open a prayer for us?
Almighty God, our Father which art in heaven, we do thank thee for this day, for all the wonderful rich blessings thou hast bestowed upon us. We're grateful for the class, grateful for these teachers that thank you, and we pray, Father, that your blessings will be upon all, and we can gain much from this study that we might be able to teach others also. Be with all whom I privilege to pray for, because of our wrong, for we ask it in Christ Jesus' name. We love you.
Amen. Well, whenever I chose Nahum, or Nahum, whenever I chose this one to teach, I mentioned it to my brother-in-law, and he says, "Are they trying to punish you?" And I said, "Well, I hope not, because I'm the one that chose it." And but basically, That's sort of the theme of Nahum, is the punishment of Nineveh. It's just in the very first verse, and I better use my phone because it's a little bit lighter and I can read better. And I should have it right there. Okay, let me find my... Okay. Now, before we actually start to read the book of Nahum, we need to back up a little bit, and we need to go back about 100 years, or maybe even longer, and review another prophet by the name of Jonah. We've already studied Jonah in here, and I'm sure you all remember pretty much the story of Jonah. But God had sent Jonah to Nineveh. Jonah didn't really want to go to Nineveh. He went the other way. He went towards Spain. He went down to Joppa and caught a boat and headed for Spain. On the way, a big storm came up. He was asleep downstairs in the ship, and everybody, the crew, they were all worried, and they started praying to their gods. The storm didn't let up; it got worse. So they went down and woke him up and said, "Come up here and pray to your God, see if it will stop it." And Jonah went up, and they cast lots, and sure enough, the problem was Jonah. And said, "Well, what should we do?" And he said, "Throw me overboard." Well, they still tried to row into shore. I don't know how far away they were from shore, but and I don't know exactly how far out it went. But they threw Jonah overboard, and a fish, giant fish, or the word actually was giant creature, a sea creature of some type, and we feel as though God's the one that prepared this particular fish. He said he did. And it swallowed him up. And for 3 days, he is inside of this fish, and eventually it spews him up on dry land. I always thought, when I read this story, that they spewed him up near Nineveh. But the Tigris River goes by Nineveh, and it doesn't really connect to that part of the ocean or that part of the Mediterranean Sea. So I don't know exactly how he got there, but anyway, he went to Nineveh after that. While he was in the belly, he prayed to God, and you would figure he was repenting at this point. Well, he repented enough to go to Nineveh and tell them an 8-word message that God had sent. Who knows what the message was? Okay, Frank?
Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown.
And yet, that's right. Yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Well, the people believed him, and they began to dress in sackcloth and sit in ashes. The word got to the king, and the king was afraid. So he sat in sackcloth and ashes. The nearest I can tell, and I'll have to ask Carolyn if this is the right pronunciation, but I think it was Asher Danenpaul. Does that sound right to you? Asher Danenpaul? He was the king that went out and sat in ashes. And because of this, God relented and did not punish him. But now we have jumped ahead a little bit. Now, what we learned from Jonah was down here at number 3. You see, says you can't hide or run away from God. He learned that. And God's will be carried out regardless of the actions of anyone. And then God uses imperfect men to carry out his will. We've seen that all through the Bible where imperfect men have carried out God's will. because there's not a perfect man, is there? For one thing. But this was a case where he was actually trying to do the opposite of what God wanted him to do. Now we can go to the book of Nahum. Now, I began to look at this book a little differently whenever I was trying to figure out how to present a lesson. And I thought, well, maybe I do it as a reporter. Now, what are the questions reporters ask? I know when I was in school, we had to do a report like a reporter. You have to ask these questions: who, what, where, when, why, and sometimes how. So, so as I asked these questions, I discovered that there is a very huge what. And it's the message that Nahum is sending to Nineveh. It's also another message that he's sending to Judah. And indirectly, he's sending a message to us today whenever we look at this and we see lessons that we can glean from this particular study. There is a definite where mentioned in the first verse, the burden to Nineveh, or of Nineveh. So we know that the where is going to be Nineveh. Also, let me see, we got the who is Nahum, the where, the what is a definite message, the where, and we're just going down here. Look at your outline there. It says the who, Nahum, the prophet of God, the burden against Nineveh. This is verse 1:1. The book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. Who knows where Elkosh was? Anybody? Doesn't really tell us. There are 4 suggested places, and what's interesting is that Capernaum actually means the city of Nahum, but they don't believe that's where it was. They think it's more down in the southern end because he was so interested in getting the message to Judah. So they feel as though this is what most scholars feel anyway. So we don't know exactly where Elkosh was. And the locations I have over here in let's see. It says the only mention of Nahum in the Old Testament is found in 1:1, where he is called the Elkoshite. At least 4 locations have been proposed for Elkosh. A 16th century tradition identifies Elkosh with Al-Kush in Iraq, south of the site of, north of the site of Nineveh on the Tigris River. Jerome believed that it was El-Kesi, a city near Ramah in Galilee, was Elkosh because of the similarity of the consonants. Capernaum means city of Nahum, and the last one, most conservative scholars believe that Elkosh was a city of southern Judah, later called El-Kesei. So, we don't know exactly where he was from, but we know what he was to do. So the who was definitely Nahum. The what was the message from God to Nineveh and Israel. A burden to one and a ray of hope for the other. It is a message of anger and judgment to Nineveh, verses 2 through 6, and a comfort to Israel. The meaning of the Hebrew word Nahum means comfort or compassion or consolation. And in his vision, Nahum sees Nineveh once again on trial before God. Now, verses verses 1. The burden against Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. God is jealous and the Lord avenges. The Lord avenges and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserves wrath for his enemies. The Lord is slow The Lord is slow to anger and great in power, and will not at all acquit the wicked. The Lord has his way in the whirlwind and in the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebukes the sea and makes it dry, and dries up all the rivers. Bashan and Carmel wither, and the flower of Lebanon wilts. The mountains quake before him. The hills melt, and the earth heaves at his presence. Yes, the world and all who dwell in it, who can stand before his indignation? And who can endure the fierceness of his anger? The fury is poured out like fire, and the rocks are thrown down by him. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who trust in him. But with an overflowing flood, he will make an utter end of its place, and darkness will pursue his enemies. What do you conspire against the Lord? He will make an utter end of it. Afflictions will not rise up a second time, for while tangled the thorns, and while drunken like drunkards, they shall be devoured like stubble fully dried. So he's describing or declaring what he's going to do to Nineveh here. He's angry with them. He tells them through Nahum that God is powerful. We see attributes of God right here. But it says God is good. And that shows right there that God is good for those that turn to him, those that turn away from him. And there's somebody that's been conspiring there against God. Now we know that during the time of Jonah, during the time that Jonah had preached his message, that they had repented. But how long did that last? We don't really know. But this is about 150, possibly 150 years later. We can kind of tell the time of and did I write that down here? Would be last phrase is the when. It's around 150 years after Jonah delivered his 8-word message to Nineveh. Jonah was contemporary of Jeroboam II, which was from 782 to 753 B.C., and Nineveh fell in 612. That's a definite. Also, it speaks in Nahum 3 about the fall of Nahum, which is also the city of Thebes. And we know that fell in 622 B.C. This gives us a 50-year window between Thebes and the destruction of Nineveh. These dates show that Nahum had to have worked approximately 150 years after Jonah, between the fall of Thebes and the fall of Nineveh. That probably is not sticking in everybody's head there, but that's exactly what took place. He was actually able to do that. Did I skip anything there? The what was definitely the message, and that was in the verse 1 and 2. And then the where, we got that, which was definitely Nineveh. Okay, so we're actually on page 2 now. As I said earlier, if I read all this, we're out of here quick. But now there's scoffers that don't believe that Jonah was actually a real story. They think it's myth. And one of the things that we know it's not is because Jesus mentioned Jonah. Matter of fact, in Norm's sermon last week, mentioned Jonah himself. They wanted a sign. And what did he say? He said, the only sign you're going to get is the sign of Jonah, being in the belly for 3 days, and then coming back out. And Jesus would be in the tomb for 3 days, and then he would be resurrected. It is hot in here. Can somebody give us a little bit of air over there? I know everybody's probably sweating like me. All right, then we come down here, but the other thing is that whenever you come back and you look at Nahum, you're going to see that 150 years later, he's taken pretty much the same message. He's not going to give them 40 days. He's going to tell them in the first chapter, it is a declaration of their punishment. There's no getting out of it now. They're going to be destroyed, is what God is saying. They have no way out. He's going to warn them, but it's more of a, like, try it. Try to do this. And we'll read that a little further along. But it's still going to happen. They're going to be destroyed, is what he's saying. The why all this is taking place comes in chapter 3. Chapter 1 is a declaration. It starts off in some of the translations, the oracle. Most of them, though, or what it's really meaning, is the burden. And the burden is the burden that Christ is going to put on Israel. And so the second chapter is all about what's going to happen. It is his decision of destruction. And the third chapter is the defense that God gives for being able, or why he's punishing them. If you've ever been caught doing something you shouldn't at home, and you're trying to get out of it, and you're saying, well, I didn't do that. Your mom, dad, they're looking at you, and they'll say, I saw you do that. I saw you take that cookie out of the jar. So I know you did that. Well, that's their defense as to why you're about to get a spanking. And that's pretty well what takes place in the third chapter, because there's a description of what Nineveh has been doing all this time. So let's do a little bit of reading here. And by the way, comments, please. If anybody has comments, feel free. Because we'll be out of here quick if not. But some people might want to do that. I did want to point out something over here. And that is these names. The first one is Sennacherib. He ruled from 705 to 681 B.C. Now, Sennacherib, you remember, we see him back in Kings, and we know that he's a bit of an arrogant Assyrian king. And he's been out conquering just about everywhere he's gone to. And he's gone down to Judah. He's wanting to conquer Judah. He's conquered about 8 cities around Judah. But as he goes to Judah, and one of the interesting things I did find was a tablet, or what they call a stela, that archaeologists found, that talked about how he had gone down and taken 8 cities around there, and he went to get Judah, but he never took it. It never says he took it. And he doesn't say what happened to him. He certainly would have been ashamed of that. But if you recall, the angel of the Lord went out and killed 185,000 of his soldiers. And he headed back to Nineveh with his tail behind him. And whenever he got back to Nineveh, he woke up dead. You know, that's yeah. I guess in a way, when we die, we wake up on the other side. So, but yes, they.
It is interesting how none of the secular history books reference the Old Testament about how it happened.
Right.
They just say that he progressed as far as Judah and then returned to Assyria, and none of them say why.
Right. I mean, and this is in cuneiform that's on these tablets that they found, and it just simply says that he returned. So, but he didn't talk about what had happened. But when he got back, guess what happened to him? Anybody? He goes in. It actually says it in Kings. Trying to remember the chapter and verse, but I don't. But anyway, the history also tells you this. But two of his sons, while he's praying to one of his gods, two of his sons come in and kill him. And he's over. Well, they skedaddle. They get out of Nineveh because they know they're going to be in trouble for killing the king. And that's when Esarhaddon, right here, Esarhaddon takes over in 681 and rules until 668 BC. And Esarhaddon was a pretty big egotist, I guess you would say. I did pronounce that right, Carolyn, didn't I? Esarhaddon. Okay, good. Thank you. But Esarhaddon, in his writings, talked about all the great things he had done. And he ruled up until 668. And then Ashurbanipal came in. Ashurbanipal actually did a lot of building up Nineveh and building up Assyria to the point of its arrogance, its total arrogance, and what they did to the people that they conquered. Then after he was off the throne and dead, Ashur-etil-ilani. Okay, she's giving me a nod over there. That's right. Ashur-etil-ilani ruled. And he didn't rule very long, if you see. He only ruled about 5 years, from 625 BC to 620. And then in 612, this is the man right here that was there when Nineveh was destroyed, whenever they came in and destroyed it. Shinshar-Ishkeen. Don't you love that name? Shinshar-Ishkeen. Just don't let anybody say that in front of you very, very quickly, because you'll have to wipe your face off because you're going to get sprayed. All right. We're going to go a little further with the reading. Okay, I'm going to go to the destruction into chapter 2 of Nahum. He who scatters has come up upon your face. Now this is looking into the future, maybe 20, 25 years. He's looking toward the destruction of Nineveh. He who scatters comes up before your face. Man the fort, watch the road, strengthen your flanks, fortify your power mightily, for the Lord will restore the excellence of Jacob like the excellence of Israel, for the empires has emptied them out and ruined their vine branches. The shields of his mighty men are made red. The valiant men are in scarlet. The chariots come with flaming torches in the day of his preparation, and the spears are brandished. The chariots rage in the streets. They jostle one another in the broad roads. They seem like torches. They run like lightning. He remembers his nobles. They stumble in their walk. They make haste to their walls, and the defense is prepared. The gates of the rivers are opened. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that we think, or most of the time we think, that Babylon alone went in there and took Nineveh down. The whole Assyrian Empire is huge. And one of the things that they've been doing is they've been alienating their allies all along. And Babylon was one of their allies at one point. They had defeated Babylon. But also they had defeated the Medes, and the Persians, the Scythians. Now they're all coming together to take down Nineveh. And where it said that the gates of the rivers are opened, the Medes had gone up and dammed a portion of the river. God sent extra rain that year, and when they opened up those gates, they flooded the Tigris. The Tigris floods came down into Nineveh, and the walls had been built with stone and mortar. And their mortar was not as strong as probably our mortar today. And the rivers had washed out a lot of that, or washed it and made it weak. So when Babylon and the Medes went in particular the Medes, they go in and they've got war machines that I didn't realize they had. They had things like battering rams that had covers over them, and soldiers could get under the covers, and here they are. They can be throwing down rocks at them. They can be throwing spears. They can be shooting arrows. They can be doing all the things that you would normally do in a siege.
When they got close to the wall, they would pour boiling pitch over on them and set them on fire like they were.
Right. I mean, this warfare was brutal. But these battering rams that they had a roof on it. It was supported, and a lot of these things just bounced right off. And they had a big ram's head at the front of the battering ram. I guess that's one reason they called it a battering ram, was because they could put that ram's head on there. But the men inside had chains or ropes that would come down on this huge log, and on each side of them, they would be doing this. And because the walls were weak, they were able to breach the walls. And they also had something called a breach tower. And these towers could be built and they could be rolled in, and they could climb these towers up, and they could actually put a walkway across onto the wall. Now, I'm not sure. I don't know whether they built them on the spot or whether they carried the parts along and just built them up to the height. But Nineveh felt as though they were invincible. And the reason they did, they had a 100-foot wall around it. And in some places, it was 50 and 60 feet wide. They could run 3 chariots side by side around this wall. And the walls, like I say, were almost impenetrable. But the floods had helped it to be weakened. And they could have gone up, gone across. The men carried shields. And the shields, what they would do is they would run up, fire their arrows, and then they would all get together and they would run shields around each other and then put shields on top so that whatever they were shooting back at them would normally bounce off. This was pretty sophisticated for its time. The Babylonians used these same tactics, of course, when they would put Judah later on by siege. But anyway, I found it interesting that it said the gates of the rivers are opened and the palace is dissolved. And therefore, we can kind of understand what was going on now. It is indeed, she shall be led away captive. She shall be brought up, and her maidservants shall lead her as with the voices of doves. What does, when you think of doves, whose name meant dove? Jonah. Okay. Jonah is actually the same thing, meant dove. And so we know we've seen the dove in various places. Usually the dove brings peace. It's going to bring peace to Judah, but it's not going to bring peace to Nineveh here. But it says the voice of doves beating their breasts. Though Nineveh of old was like a pool of water, now they flee away. Halt, halt, they cry, but no one turns back. People are trying to get out of there. Everybody's trying to leave. Take spoil of silver, take spoil of gold. There is no end of treasure. So the folks that are taking Nineveh, they're sacking it. What did Hezekiah do when Sennacherib went down and then demanded tribute from Judah? Y'all remember? I read it last night. Sennacherib goes down. He's going to put siege on Judah. And Hezekiah, he's got a message is sent to him and says, send us tribute. So Hezekiah sends gold out to the ambassador, I guess you would say, the person that had come up, the head of the army there. And he has sent the gold, but where did he take it from? Took it from the temple. And this is God's gold. But he took it from the temple and sent it out to him, but that wasn't going to stop him. But they were assured by the prophet that don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be taken by Sennacherib. And it was, as we mentioned earlier, that's when he lost 185,000 men that woke up dead. So, but where these people are trying to get away, they're saying, no, don't leave. Don't go. Help stand and fight. No, they're trying to get out of there. And the city is being sacked. She is empty, desolate, and waste. The heart melts, and the knees shake. Much pain is in every side, and all their faces are drained of color. Where is the dwelling of the lions, and the feeding place of the young lions? Where the lions walked, the lioness and the lion's cub, and no one made them afraid? No, he's saying, where was it that they were not afraid? They're afraid now. They're all afraid. The lion tore in pieces enough for his cubs, killed for his lioness, filled the caves with prey and his dens with flesh. Behold, I am against you, says the Lord of hosts. I will burn your chariots in smoke, and the sword shall devour your young lions. I will cut off your prey from the earth, and the voice of your messengers shall be heard no more. And then in the last chapter, woe to the bloody city. That's a good description here. As they've been invaded, everyone's being killed or taken captive. One of the things that the Assyrians would do to kind of keep control of the people that they took is they would move them. If they came in here, say Assyria came in here and took LaGrange, all the inhabitants of LaGrange, they would take them and move them to, they would probably move them to Texas.
If they really wanted to punish us, they moved us to like Birmingham,
Well, Frank's over here. Be careful. Well, I tell you, I think that there's a place in Tennessee. The traffic is so bad up there, they'd probably move them up there. But wherever they would move them somewhere else so that they were displaced. And then whenever they would take somebody else, they would move them, say, back to over here to LaGrange. And so that nobody really knows what they're doing anymore. But in this last chapter, woe to the bloody city. It is all full of lies and robbery. Its victims never depart the noise of a whip and the noise of rattling wheels, of galloping horses, of clattering chariots, horsemen charged with bright sword and glittering spear. There's a multitude of slain, a great number of bodies, countless corpses. They stumble over the corpses because of the multitude of harlotries of the seductive harlot, the mistress of sorceries who sells nations through her harlotries and families through her sorceries. He's talking about what Nineveh and what Assyria does in this chapter. This is not them being invaded here. This is what they're being charged against. And this is why they're going to be punished. Behold, I'm against you, says the Lord of hosts. I will lift your skirts over your face. I will show the nations your nakedness and the kingdoms of your shame. That's a pretty powerful description right there. To be able to just throw them up, throw the skirts up. Now everybody's naked out there. They are shameful, is what he's saying. I will cast abominable filth upon you, make you vile, and make you a spectacle. It shall come to pass that all who look upon you will flee from you and say, Nineveh is laid waste. Who will bemoan her? Where shall I seek comforters for you? Remember what Nahum, the word means? Comfort. There are no comforts. No one is going to be there to comfort Nineveh. No one is going to be able to comfort Assyria. Assyria will last about 3 more years after Nineveh falls. The whole empire will be gone and swallowed up by Babylonia. Nineveh is laid waste. Who will bemoan her? Where shall I seek comforters for you? Are you better than Nahum? That's thieves. Remember, we talked about that earlier. Whose rampart was the sea, whose wall was the sea. Ethiopia and Egypt were her strength, and it was boundless. Put and Lubim were your helpers. Yet she was carried away. She went into the captivity. Her young children also were dashed to pieces. All the head of every street, they cast lots for her honorable men, and all of her great men were bound in chains. You also will be drunk. You will be hidden. You also will seek refuge from the enemy. All your strongholds are fig trees with ripened figs. If they are shaken, they fall into the mouth of the eater. He's saying, you guys, and they were unprepared. And it's saying, they're like fig trees that are ripened. All you have to do is shake it, and the figs fall into those that are to do the downfall of it. Fire shall devour the bars of your gates. Draw your water for the siege. Fortify your strongholds. Go into the clay and tread the mortar. Make it stronger is what he's saying. Make strong the brick kiln. But he's laughing at them in a way because he knows, he's already telling them it's not going to do any good. There the fire will devour you. The sword will cut you off. I will eat you up like a locust. Make yourself many like the locust. Make yourself many like the swarming locust. You have multiplied your merchants more than the stars of heaven. The locust plunders and flies away. Your commanders are like swarming locusts, all your generals like great grasshoppers, which camp in the hedges on a cold day. When the sun rises, they flee away. All the place, and the place where they are is not known. So they've gone, the nobles are trying to hide. They're trying to get away. The people are scattered on the mountains, and no one gathers them. Your injury has no healing. Your wound is severe. All who hear news of you will clap their hands over you, for upon whom has not your wickedness passed continually? Everybody that has had anything to do with them is going to cheer. I remember seeing a picture of a sailor come from Life magazine at the end of World War II. And in that picture, he's kissing this lady. As it turned out later on, they did find who these people were, but they really didn't know each other at the time. But the word had just come through that the war in Europe was over. And then it would be a few months, be until August before the total World War II would be over. But people were cheering everywhere that Hitler was defeated. When they heard that he had died, people cheered. Y'all remember when Osama bin Laden was killed by the Navy SEALs, that the White House was watching it, and they clapped their hands. Well, that's what he's saying is going to take place when Nineveh falls. You have no friends left. Your punishment is going to be total destruction. I'm going to bury you. And guess what? In the 1800s, they found Nineveh. They found some of the other capitals of Assyria. The archaeologists did. And where were they? They were buried. They were under tells. And you can, well, I don't think we can go see them today because, frankly, over there, it's not the safest place in the world for a Christian to be walking around. But I watched a video of a gentleman that was going from one capital city to the next. And the walls, some of the walls still stand. Some of the tablets have been taken to museums. But guess what happened in 2017? ISIS found them. And ISIS went in there and tried to destroy them all over again. They said were like taking the sledgehammers to them and blowing them up. What they're doing with them today to try and get the history of what took place is they're putting them together like a puzzle. And so, and one of the things too, it's kind of interesting that I'm doing this lesson today, but there are lessons that we learn from this. And right down toward the bottom of the second page, number one, righteousness cannot or can't pass to the next generation without teaching. If you look at Judges 2:7, there was a generation that came along that no longer knew God. Why didn't they know God? Hadn't been taught to them. We've got to teach our children about God today. If we don't, it's going to be just like it was with the judges. When the book of Judges begins, the time of Joshua, everyone was faithful. But there came a time later when nobody knew God. And we learn here that Nineveh had repented, but they didn't pass it along. The next king comes along, just reverts right back to the way it was. The second one, God rules. He rules the government of men. You can find that. We've read that in verse 2 all the way through 8 of chapter 1. It's also mentioned from chapter 3. verses 8 through 10, and then Daniel 2:20 through 22 and 4:17 talks and shows how God still rules today. God, number 3, is a stronghold in time of trouble for those who turn to him. Do we turn to God every time we're in trouble? A lot of times we don't. We think, hey, we can get by with it right now. We can make it on our own. But if we would pray to God every time we're in trouble, he'll help us out. And that's the time in Judges in particular. That's the only time that God kind of came back to help them out, was when they finally started praying to him and repenting. Number 4, when God sets out to punish the wicked, there's no safe place to hide. There is no safe place to go. The punishment is going to happen. What's going to happen when Jesus comes back? You're in or out. There's no sitting on the fence. There's no gray. It's either going to be black or white. You're going to be headed to heaven, or you're going to be headed to hell, one or the other. Number 5, and this one right here, I can't help, and I'm going to show you. You know how much I like visual aids, and I really didn't have much in the way of visual aids today. Over here, I've got on the chalkboard some kings. And I did have some of the gods that I could have put up there, but I didn't know what gods they were for, so I didn't put them up. But his patience runs out at a certain point. And his patience is going to run out with our world as well one day. In Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. But the good thing for us is number 7. God is slow to anger, but he does not allow sin to go unpunished. And that unpunished means that at some point, those that are unfaithful will be punished. Now then, my visual aid. Got to thinking about it, and we know that God rules everything. He sees us, and over here we are. And over here is where the Assyrian world was. He destroyed it. Through the years, he's destroyed many things. But when you look at Africa down here, it's all divided up. Not like the United States, Canada. They're pretty well solid as to what they are. South America, not too divided, like Africa, where it all started. But today, God is looking at us. He's looking at Africa, or rather South America and Africa. He's looking over here at Russia, India. He's watching us all the time. And his patience is going to run out. And Jesus is going to come back. And when he does, we better be ready. And that's my lesson. Anybody have any questions or comments at this point? If not, thank y'all for coming. And you folks out there, if there's any questions you have, feel free to comment. You can comment on this particular video. If there's information you'd like to get, Norm, the rest of us, be happy to talk to you, send you whatever information we have. All right. Y'all have a great day.